I met Kobi Snitz back in 2008 when a mutual friend basically said he was going to be in town. He was with Anarchists Against the Wall, and did anyone want to meet him? And I jumped at the opportunity to interview him for my book, which there are copies out there, Refusing to be Enemies. And we've been in touch on and off since. He's one of my major informants on how things are progressing, particularly with the struggle against the wall and confiscation of Palestinian land for settlements, and the participation of Israelis alongside Palestinians in that struggle, which you're going to hear more about. And so Kobi is also with a group called Boycott from Within, and this is something you don't hear much about. It's Israeli, I guess, is it all Jewish Israelis? Israeli citizens who, from inside Israel, are supporting the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So, without further ado, as they say, here's Kobi.
Thanks, Maxine, and thanks for the other co-sponsors, and thanks for coming out. I want to start with the current negotiations. You hear a lot about them, and you might wonder what are they all about. Well, I think the most common answer you hear in the Israeli press, it's quite openly discussed that the negotiations are about nothing. Here's how Chemi Shalev, Haaretz reporter, described it this last Friday. At least some of the decision makers have returned to the realization that pointless negotiations are also preferable to alternatives in the unknown. The importance is in their mere existence. This is true politically to prevent dismantling the coalition, and also diplomatically to prevent the isolation of Israel. You hear this, and you will hear this again. The point of the negotiations has nothing to do with reaching an agreement, merely to buy more time and perpetuate the current situation, which allows for further expansion of Israeli facts on the ground. Again, the discussion is purely about who is going to be left blamed by the Americans at the end of the negotiations. This translates into how much license Israel is going to be given by the Americans, the crucial sponsor of Israeli policies. How much license is Israel going to get to continue current policies? The best information that I was able to find, the current negotiations, one of the key issues is presence of the IDF on the eastern border of a possible Palestinian state in the Jordan Valley. This is something that wasn't demanded in the Olmert proposal in 2008. So the Israeli position since 2008 to this point has become more radical, and more demands are being made of Palestinians at this stage of the negotiations. This is the most meaningful indication of what sort of pressure is actually applied to Israel. And the result of this lack of pressure is a perpetuation of the current situation, and what it means to Palestinians, and a situation as of today which is considered a relatively peaceful one. There isn't an official war going on. Gaza is not being bombed. And as far as Israel is concerned, this is a peaceful situation. This peaceful situation means that the following kind of incidents are regular occurrence. Take an example from a few weeks ago, the shooting of 14-year-old Yusuf Shawarmeh in South Hebron Hills. He and some of his friends were crossing over the separation barrier that's built on their land to pick some edible plants. They were shot from an ambush by IDF forces, and Yusuf bled to death on the spot. You might you might wonder what are going to be the ramifications, which is a more indicative point. Soldiers, let's grant that soldiers might have been afraid, that they might have misinterpreted the situation. If we grant all of these things and say that the shooting was not completely deliberate, the crucial question is what happens in the aftermath. And an indication of that is easy to find in earlier cases. On 15 January 2003, 16-year-old Samir Awad was shot also from an ambush in Budus, a very similar situation. Awad and other young men from Budus demonstrated at the wall. They might have crossed it or damaged it. They were not threatening anybody. There's no claim that they were, such as in the previous case. He was also shot to death. Reports have it that he was shot twice. After being injured and trying to escape, he was shot again from close range. Over a year later, the Army Attorney General has not indicted any of the shooters or even announced that they're going to indict or that they're going to drop the case. You'd think that a year would be enough to file an indictment. The clear meaning of this is that there's not going to be an indictment, and the Attorney General doesn't even bother to make the announcement to that effect, and they're just waiting this out. There's, in fact, an Israeli organization who's kept very busy doing exactly these things, Yesh Din, whose job it is to harass the military prosecution and the police into just following up these cases, just investigating the case, filing charges, prosecuting the shooters, etc. It's a full-time occupation for a very busy organization. There's other cases here, but the standard procedure is that for Palestinian shootings, there's almost never an investigation that leads to an indictment. Another case, this is January 23rd, 2013, near Arub refugee camp, a young woman, 21-year-old Lubna El-Hanash, was shot while walking by the road. Again, a year later, no indictments and no announcement of the case being closed. This case is slightly different. There has, in fact, been an arrest related to this case. It's the arrest of an Israeli activist who, during a demonstration in the South Mount Hebron Hills, asked the officer who shot El-Hanash, how does it feel? And he was arrested for insulting a public servant. So it isn't true that there's that the legal system in Israel is not working. It did work in this case. Lastly, another indicative case is that of Arafat Jaradat. He died in custody also. This was February 2013. A young man dies in custody. The Israeli pathologist, the now disgraced Israeli pathologist Yehuda Hiss, led the pathological exam and concluded that this is the death is caused from natural causes. A young man dies in custody, and the autopsy declares it a natural cause, and so no investigation follows. However, the Association to Stop Torture in Israel invited an independent forensic pathologist to examine the case, and she determined that he suffered torture and that the torture led to his death at Megiddo prison. Again, this is the state of affairs not at the case of an emergency. This is a peaceful period in Israel. These things occur regularly, and the lack of ramification, prosecution, or accountability is more indicative than anything. It indicates a permanent policy and one that needs to be opposed systematically. And to turn to the opposition to it, it's broad-ranging, and it's been a long struggle to this point. I want to focus on one particular obstacle that is encountered by the opposition, and that's the association of Israel with the Jewish community in general. It's a well-used rhetorical and ideological device, and I think that it should be considered more closely, especially now that it's beginning to be undermined, and it's beginning to be undermined and noticed by the Israeli government and the movement that supports it. Well, the most clear expression of this identification is the principle that Israel is the state of the Jewish people, not just the Jewish people who live in it, the Jewish people everywhere. Now, the first implication is the one for Palestinians. The Palestinian refugees are not allowed to come back. The Palestinian citizens who are systematically discriminated against, and the Palestinians living under occupation who aren't even citizens. The implications to them are clear. It's not their state. It's a state that's not interested in their welfare, and in fact is interested in the perpetuation of their state as refugees and stateless people. But there is another implication to this position, and that is one which instrumentalizes the Jewish community and puts the needs, the perceived needs of the state in opposition to the needs of the Jewish community. Here is how this is described by Natan Sharansky, a human rights icon to some, and the former Minister of Diaspora Affairs in Jerusalem. He's speaking about a bombing in the Jewish center in Argentina. Actually, I just on the way here heard that there was a shooting in it was a Kansas City of some Jewish centers. So this is a similar situation. This is how Natan Sharansky describes a situation such as this. The state of Israel was born in order to be a national home for the Jewish people. Zionist leaders have always declared that the Jewish state belongs not just to its citizens, but to Jewish people as a whole. For example, Argentinian Jews paid a heavy price for the Israeli decisions when, in revenge for the elimination of a leader of Hezbollah, the organization blew up Jewish community center and murdered hundreds of Jews. Now, Sharansky, I think, he must think that this thing is a fine thing. Not that there was a bombing. I'm sure he's opposed to the bombing, but he just sees it as it's only right that Jews would be associated with Israel, even if that means that they're considered responsible for actions of Israel in Lebanon. When Israel is fighting Hezbollah, every Jewish Argentinian is fighting Hezbollah, according to Sharansky, whether they like it or not, whether these Jews are interested in this fight or if they're not. In that, he shares the assumptions of the people who presumably carried out the attack. So these are two consequences of this position. One, at the expense of Palestinians, and also at the expense of Jewish communities everywhere.